I think it's respectful.
I think it's critical. Language is really important.
I think it's a great step forward for the game.
Is the right thing to do.
We want the game to grow.
So why not use language that is inclusive to everyone that's listening?
So recently I was watching a one-day international being played between two women's teams, and the batters from both the teams were addressed as bats lady, bats person, batswoman, batsman. I mean, why can't we simply use the term batter? Does not cost me anything, and it is so accurate.
I mean, it's never too late to do the right thing, right? The question was never why. The question is really why did it take us so long?
Me as a youngster, I was quite rough and tumble, and I just wanted to play with the boys, and I didn't really register about batsmen and that type of thing. It's only kind of when I started playing with girls and started playing in a girls team where I was like, but we aren't really batsmen, where batswoman doesn't really work nicely, so let's just call ourselves batters. But yeah, so it's more as I've gotten older that it's started to bother me a little bit.
Having done and covered the women's game, one of the things that I myself and many of us as commentators, when we just came into it, sometimes you kept slipping back into the articulation and the wording that you're accustomed to. In this way, I think future generations, writers, broadcasters would be able to more easily slip into the right terminologies. And again, some may look at it and snide at it, but I think it is absolutely the right thing to do.
I think it's critical. Language is really important. It sends signals to young girls, it sends signals to young boys about who this game is for. And I think the manufacturers have started to do some work in this area where they now label things as sizes that aren't related to the male gender, which is helpful. Things like small men's or boys' size, etc. And I think the terminology used in the game, in the laws, by the commentators is absolutely critical to ensure that the game is inclusive and that everyone understands that there's a place for them in it.
I mean, there are a lot of other terms that we need to address. There is third man, there is night watchman, there is maiden over. But batsman was the main thing, really, because that required back-end changes, that required making changes in the database. And all these other changes can be done easily, swiftly, and we don't really need to make, there's no that sort of effort required. It's just a question of habit.
I think normalising the language around cricket is just a step that a lot of the younger generation are taking themselves anyway. So to Cricinfo to help that pathway and to make it easier, and particularly for ex-players who have grown up with a different use of terminology, it's a great starting point for them so that they can get on the same page as the current younger generations.
It is certainly something I know within Australia we've been very conscious about. Even covering the WBBL when that was formed, the commentators, Andy Marr, Mel Jones and myself really wanted to change the language to make it more inclusive. So we started to use batter, and it's been actually a fascinating journey because we had female broadcasters around the world that were still saying batsman. And I still remember in the 2017 World Cup, we were all together and we had quite a robust discussion and saying, well, you know what, I'm used to it. It's how it's always said over here. And I guess the conversation was around, if we don't change it, who will?
Some people would say it's semantic. Some people would say it's politically correct. No, I think it is trying to create a sense of equity, even in the naming, the branding, the wording that we use in bringing parity to the men's and women's game.
I've been asked often that why we could not just stick to batsmen for men and batswomen for women. But you really have to understand the broader picture here, that the sovereignty of one term over another. When you think of batting, you train to associate batsmen with it and batsmanship with it. We just really needed to break that chain. We really needed to think of a term that is completely gender neutral and doesn't evoke any kind of imagery, not for us, for generations to come really.
What's really important is, and maybe some males don't quite get this, but when you say batsman or man of the match, or when you say, hey boys, when you're in the backyard, do this, girls kind of tune out because you're not talking to them, or they don't feel like you're talking to them. And that may not be the case for everyone, but I guess as commentators, we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. And there are men and women, boys and girls, watching and listening to the game. So why not use language that is inclusive to everyone that's listening?
In all aspects of life, terms like that have been changed. So like, it's not policeman, it's police officer, and it's not fireman, it's firefighter. So I think it's not like it shouldn't be such a massive shock to some people that it is changing. And yeah, I think it's a great step forward for the game and for inclusivity and to make the game more appealing to young girls.
So for me, the logic in this whole argument about the usage of gender neutral terms is very, very simple. One girl feeling more included and hence desiring to take up the game of cricket is way, way bigger than losing or not having or gaining 100 fans who are unwelcoming and discriminating.